Oh, good. Good. Oh, yeah. Should we begin? I'm still waiting for 4 or 5 guests. I'm sure they do. Yeah, yeah. Hello, testing. Perfect. I always try to, like, my mantras are to over deliver and be the least intelligent person in the room, so you have the most to learn. And in a room full of quantum physicists, I feel like I've really been on brand right now. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event at Capital Factory. It's an absolute honor to have this gathering in collaboration with Quantonation. A few months ago, when Christophe let me know his team was going to be in Houston later in the year, I mentioned the idea of also having an event at Capital Factory, and it didn't take much convincing. I moved to Austin just a year ago, and I've fallen in love with the city's dynamic, ever-shifting landscape of ambition and creativity. It's a city where people are always interacting with each other and amplifying one another instead of competing. And it's a city where superposition of diverse ideas can lead to extraordinary breakthroughs. And so, we have a really amazing, diverse group of people here tonight. And when the serendipitous entanglement of doers, dreamers, and dollars come together, anything is possible. So I'm really proud to live in Austin, and I'm really proud to have played a role in bringing everyone together here tonight. And so, without much further ado, here's Quantonation.
Thanks, Donnie. Hey, I wanted to thank Donnie, thank Capital Factory, and everybody for coming out tonight. Also, there's a tip jar. You get 1 superposition joke per person. After that, you got to put some money in the jar. So my name's Will Zeng. I'm a partner at Quantonation. And listen, we were promised jetpacks, and we got dating apps. We were promised energy too cheap to meter, and we got collectible JPEGs with fake scarcity. If we want to get to the future, which has real impact that we dream of, then we got to invest in the physics technologies that led the last century of progress, right? Physics tech was the silicon transistor, lasers, microwave communications, and what you're going to hear about in the rest of the event today are what comes next for physics tech. At Quantonation, we're a venture firm that invests in early stage physics technologies, like what you're going to hear about from some of our portfolio today. Maybe we'll go to the next slide. And then we're going to have a panel. And I want to thank Jason. Where's Jason? Over here. From the Austin Next podcast, who's going to moderate. And then you can also volley in your questions as well. The last thing I'll say, if you can go to the next slide, is we have a presence here already with some of our portfolio companies in Austin. So Orca Computing, Tian An is here somewhere. Perfect. Pardon? Oh, we're going to do a whole little covering thing. So Orca Computing does photonic quantum technologies, Qubit Pharmaceuticals does quantum chemistry and simulation for drug development, and Tau is doing commercial particle accelerators. So without further ado, to answer questions like how many AUM we have, which is on the next slide, I'll hand over to Christophe Jurczak, our managing partner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. So we'll make a short introduction about the fund, Quantonation, what it is, what we have performed, what we have achieved so far. Not going too much into the details, but then we can chat and have further conversations. So the fund itself has been created in 2018. We have a little bit more than 200 million euro under management. Euro because the fund is based in France. The team is split between Boston, New York, where Will is based. I'm based in Boston, and there's a partner and most of the team in Paris. Eleonore, head of communication, is here. She came just from Paris yesterday to prepare for a fantastic event here today. We have invested in 32 startups so far in quantum and deep physics. I'll explain a little bit more about this later. Very international, more than 10 countries we have invested in so far. And important also, we're open for investments for LPs. This is our second fund. First fund, 90 million, is largely invested. We're currently raising a 200 million fund. We're halfway, a little bit more than 100 million raised in 6-7 months. In the current context, I think it's not too bad for early stage investment, and we're looking to close this fund by the end of the year, early next year. So I like to show this picture. That's me. Probably you recognize somewhere on the right there with the weird shirt, green and blue. I look like the physicist, sorry, not physician, physicist. There's a couple in the room, they recognize the dressing. But it's important, I think, and that's part of the team. Will is a physicist as well. He has a PhD in quantum. Me was much earlier with Alain Aspect, so the guy with the mustache, Nobel Prize there, 2022. I think what we do is to try to decode what people tell us, especially founders. We need to understand very precisely what's at stake, because if you don't do that, I think you can there can be pretty big misunderstandings about the horizon of application of these technologies. And I think that's really our job, to learn, to listen, and to try to do things that matter in the short term. Few words on our vision. I will not go too much into this, just a few details. What we're really interested in is to go from science to products, then to revenues. And many of our portfolio companies, although we've started in 2018, are generating sizable revenues already, anywhere from a couple millions to 20, 30 million per year already. We're very interested, and we push for them to industrialize. So typically in an academic setup, an experiment, it works maybe 20%, 30% of the time. You don't care too much, but when it's a product, it has to work 90, 95, 99% of the time so that you can perform a computation. And that's clear focus for us to turn this into product. And last point is also important when we're talking about quantum. It's not just quantum, it's also a combination of different technologies. Quantum and AI, quantum and classical computing, for example. These things work together, should not be opposed. And that's something we do also throughout our portfolio. And this is our portfolio in 4 categories of startups. So big focus so far on quantum computing. That's the first category with different technologies. There's one, Tau, here. He's local. Tau Systems. Orca Computing, CTO, is there. And the Qubit Pharmaceuticals, Pengyu, co-founder, is there as well. So actually, our biggest presence in the US is in Austin, actually. By far. I think we've got Noel in New York, we've got a company in DC area, and one in Chicago as well for the US, and the rest quite a lot in Europe, but also as far as Australia. We've invested in Australia in silicon spin qubits, for example. So these are the 4 categories: compute, hardware, software, quantum networks, and Noel will talk and tell you what it is, and post-quantum crypto as well, sensing, how to use quantum technologies to have better precision in measuring things, temperature, magnetic fields, for example. And the 4th category, which is a little bit fourre-tout, as we say in French, but I think means a lot to us, is called deep physics. So it's a little bit less quantum, but pretty much targeting the same classes of applications. And nice thing is also that usually it's a little bit shorter term as well. You rely a little bit less on entanglement, all these factors that are hard to manipulate, and you can get to applications in a short time frame. So 32 companies and counting. We'd like to reach about 45 at the end of the 2 funds, at the end of the investment periods over 2 funds, and we should get there relatively quickly. There's a large portfolio pipeline of companies around. So I will not go too much into that, but this one I wanted to show just to give a perspective on what it is that we do in a fund. Of course, we invest in companies one at a time, but then it's also important to have a picture of how these technology work together. I think there's a good example. There's a topic that's called quantum error correction in the field of quantum computing. There's been a lot of new developments over the years, but actually there's been a lot of new developments over 20 years. I mean, that's what's shown in one of the pictures here. These are started a long time ago. You need to have this perspective, understand where it's coming from. Physics it takes time to do science and to get to technology. And also the idea of seeing how this technology work together, how you can connect quantum network companies with quantum computing company, resource estimates on the software side, develop new algorithms, etc. That's how you build a whole ecosystem and technologies that in the end will matter. So we have this vision in the fund and try also to organize the connections, the communications and the collaborations as far as possible between the startups in the portfolio. For the ones who are interested in, well, let's say, in investment, I think I just want to give a few indicators. So VC in quantum is not too big. It's about $2 billion per year worldwide. It's been largely early stage so far, but it's growing because companies are maturing. When they reach Series C, Series D, they will raise 200, 300 million, and then obviously the numbers will go up. We've seen a couple of SPACs in the last SPAC frenzy a couple of years ago, might come back, but this year what we've seen also is an increase in investment. Last year was tough. It was tough for everybody in VC. But this year, things have been happening, and we should be back to 2 billion invested, more or less, venture capital in quantum technologies this year. Still a relatively small segment when you compare to AI, but growing, and we believe there's quite a lot of margin there. And there are projects to invest in. And the other thing that's interesting, that what I was mentioning at the beginning, markets are taking off. At the bottom on this picture here, you see the quantum computing market estimate for the future, but a real number so far. So this is reaching $1.5 billion dollars per year, half and half, let's say, machines and software use case application, and growing. There's been a lot of procurement of quantum processors, especially in Europe, now also Japan, Singapore, and elsewhere, also in the US. This is a big part of the story. So the market is definitely taking off. And last, I just want, since I think that could be super interesting, also would be interesting in exploring contributing to the development of a local ecosystem as well. So you ask about what's local, but I think it doesn't happen on its own. I just want to give an example of an ecosystem we like, which is in Sherbrooke, much further north in Quebec. So it's a relatively small university, but they have been developing a concept that's very interesting, Espace Quantique 1, co-location space, where you have quantum computers, manufacturing. PASQAL has installed a factory for North America. You've got a quantum communications test bed. You've got office space. You've got a big GPU cluster as well. So co-location matters. I think like you can have people work together and develop and build synergies as well. And that's something that we're super interested in. All the more because on top of that, we built with our local partners the notion of a venture studio. So how to generate more companies from a local ecosystem. It's not easy to start a quantum company. Of course, there are tech transfer offices, there's IP discussions, etc. How to take the IP out of the university and start a company. But we think a little bit more is needed. And when you have these infrastructures, it's way easier. So we have a studio in Sherbrooke now. We have one in Rome, in Italy, working on one in France, and we're looking at several geographies in the US, Australia, Singapore, Japan, etc., to have a network of programs like that. And I think that's important. And the last point I wanted to make is the way quantum is developed, quantum applications for quantum computing in particular, is done through proof of concepts. These are relatively small projects, let's say, funded $500,000 to $1 million, typically, to develop applications for quantum computers. I think this works. This has been working quite well so far, but we believe that what we need to do is is structure more collaborative approaches on themes, on topics with an impact, how to develop quantum for something. Here in that case, the example was about climate and sustainability. There was a very nice conference last year in New York State, where we had researchers, startup, corporates work together and talk about what's the plan, how could we put more quantum computing for this kind of research. Interestingly enough, some of the participants were from ARPA-E, and they started this year. Well, it's in a plan. There was a workshop a couple of weeks ago. Super interesting. Quantum computing for energy innovations. This is coming a little bit from these discussions, and I think we can do more on this topic. Energy, other topics, simulation of climate, etc. But this is not just happening one project at a time. So we believe strong initiatives like that, well-funded, will matter. And that's the reason why we're sponsoring this event, which is going to happen in Paris. So if any of you is interested, it's Alain Aspect Symposium, 19th and 20th of November. A very nice place, just 30 minutes east of Paris, co-organized with local partners, X Campus in particular. It's going to be over 2 days. The idea is to bring researchers from the climate field, express their needs in terms of computation, and see if and when quantum technologies can help, both in sensing and computation. So over 2 days, I hope it's going to be a successful event. And to finish, and this is the very, very last slide, so happy to share that we are offering a discount on the product that's Whurley is here somewhere. Where is he? He's there. So Whurley and me were interested in this company. We put a small investment, personal, each of us. I think they're, and some others as well, they're developing simulators, emulators of quantum computers. So up to 30 qubits. So that's something you can do and connect to your laptop. And then there's a whole programming environment that comes with it. So it's a very good way to start learning about how to program a quantum computer, learn about the language, how to do it, and there's a discount. So with the code word Quantonation Quokka, until end of November, you get a 5% discount on this. So there's not that many left, so you should rush and have a look at that, but that's a pretty interesting way. And universities all around the world are interested in procuring these machines. I think, of course, it's not the price of a true quantum computer, but that's a good way to get started on this obviously important topic. I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Great. And so next up, we've got Wasiq, who's the chairman at PASQAL, which is a neutral atom quantum computing company.
So we are a late stage quantum computing company. We are based out of Paris. Is that better? I was going to do a Darth Vader. No. So, a little louder? Is that better? Fantastic. Okay. So, PASQAL, we are a late stage or a later stage quantum computing company based out of Paris. Three of the key co-founders of PASQAL, Alain Aspect, Christophe talked about, Antoine Brouet, he's a world authority in neutral atoms, and George Olivier, who did some of the earliest work in neutral atoms, and also has industry experience. But there's one co-founder, in my view, who's missing, and that's Christophe in this picture. And I just want to do a shout out to Quantonation. Quantonation, as the earliest investor, you have always rolled up your sleeves to help build the company from scratch. And where we are, your fingerprints or imprint is on every aspect of it. So I think of you as a co-founder of PASQAL. We have about 230 people, mostly in France, but now in multiple locations worldwide. Our vision is to basically break the limits of computing. We all know Moore's law is ending, and there's a lot of talk about it, but I'll talk about that in a second on how generative AI and quantum computing help extend that, or in some very fundamental ways, change it. So let me just spend a minute on this. Quantum computing versus traditional computing versus Gen AI. Three different beasts. Quantum computing, by its very nature can solve problems that are just not accessible to traditional computing, no matter how powerful of a traditional computer you make. Similarly, for Gen AI, there are problems in nature like the number of possible proteins or the number of possible chemicals that can exist. They have a combinatorial explosion in terms of the number of possibilities that exist. You just cannot train any Gen AI model to go through the entire phase space or that possibility space. But quantum computers, by design through quantum mechanics, will explore the entire possibility space. So this is a very key point, and this is something that we are on the threshold of literally grasping as a brand new paradigm of doing computation. And for this reason, we believe that quantum computation is a co-equal pillar of the future of computation along with traditional high-performance computing and along with Gen AI, which is emerging. This is, I think, a very important part of our thesis, and we are proving it in a step-by-step fashion, which I'll talk about in a second. So first of all, we make plug-and-play quantum computers. So a lot of us, I can only speak about myself, a lot of us, we have a lot of academic background, but we also have a lot of industry background. We have built and productized multiple systems, we have scaled them, and one of the things we have learned is that if you want to sell something, you need to provide a full solution. It has to be a standard solution that has to be reliable, it has to be scalable, and it has to be cost competitive. So that was part of our thesis from the very day. First day in the company is not to build lab scale systems, but production grade systems. And that's gone through every part of our design and thinking. So we provide plug and play quantum computers. And as I said, they're based on neutral atoms. Now, why neutral atoms are interesting? Everybody talks about creating qubits. Our qubit is an atom. Every atom is literally the same as every other atom. And the physics of that is very well known. So we have no yield issues. We can scale it, and a lot of problems around scalability and error correction and coherence have been solved over the last few years. For the longest time, people have only thought about superconducting qubits and other modalities as the main modes, but neutral atoms have been the dark horse here. And Antoine's lab is one of the leading places in the whole world to develop a lot of this capability. That's why this whole area has come from nowhere and is now considered a leading candidate in quantum computing, which is scalable. Now, computers are not enough. Hardware is not enough. You need to build the stack. So hardware-specific software, application software, solutions, services, everything. We build the whole thing, and on top of it, partnership. We have published a pretty detailed roadmap of our hardware that's coming out and our software, but we have a very robust partnership with multiple software vendors and so on that provide the full ecosystem. So you can define the kind of problem you want to solve, and we will find a way to go and solve it, and we will help you identify and build the solution for it. We have raised more than 100 million euros to date. As I mentioned, Quantonation is a key investor, very early investor, but amongst others, Temasek, Saudi Aramco, and so on and so forth, very large names who are not only partners but also customers. One thing I want to also drill down deeper is going from a lab scale system to a production grade system. It is a journey, and it has to be ingrained in your DNA from day one. But these are some of the steps that we have taken, and these have all been validated by external third parties. And the reason I'm showing this graph is that a lot of other good companies have not thought about doing this. And that's why we feel that we are building a competitive advantage in the market. Now let me talk about another competitive advantage. So when we think about quantum computers, we take the analogy of these generalized computers that we have that can solve any problem. That's a universal computer. And a lot of people talk about digital versions of universal quantum computers. But the truth is, with a platform like neutral atoms, you can do it in digital mode, or you can do it in analog mode. A lot of people are trying to build digital quantum computers which are susceptible to noise. But what we can also do is that we can literally take these atoms, let's say 100 or hundreds of atoms, we can create a configuration in 3D space of these atoms, and that configuration represents the problem we are trying to solve. And then we let the system minimize its energy. And that is a solution to the problem. What an elegant, beautiful way of utilizing quantum mechanics just purely. And that is a big advantage we have. And one of the things we have done is, we have drilled down into that, is to see what are the class of problems we can solve. So there's a very broad class of problems in optimization and decision making, as well as physics and discovery, very broad class of problems that we can solve using this. And that's what we are doubling down on, while at the same time We have a very robust roadmap of building digital quantum computers, which will start to come out as well. And one of the most important things that we have learned is a company doesn't matter unless you can solve somebody's problem and they're willing to pay for it, and you can deliver a return on investment. So the way we are doing this is as follows. Instead of waiting for the mythical, perfect universal quantum computer to exist, which we will create shortly, we are taking the analog mode and we are going and mapping out key business problems, working collaboratively with our customers and solving those problems. And at this point, we have more than 30 customers who are entrusting us to their business critical problems. And I won't go through all of those details. They're globally all over the place. But I'll just flash some at a high level just to give you a sense of the breadth of what is possible today. This is logistics and supply chain optimization with one of the largest logistics companies in the world, CGM. They're also an investor in the company. For a very large telco in Paris, we designed their telco network, and what we showed was that through quantum computation on our systems, we can cut the time to design by 90%. We can do it today. This is on how we can predict this is for portfolio optimization, very important problem. So broken angels are people who lose their credit rating, and that changes the portfolio risk overall. And because the number of parameters is very high, traditional computation is very inefficient on this. We have shown that we can solve this much more efficiently than the best systems that this leading bank had. Predicting toxicity of molecules. Can I take that question after the talk? Great question. Let me go back, sorry. So the key point here is materials design, and we can do that today. Saudi Aramco, all the way from upstream to downstream business, very complicated business. So they're investor as well as a purchaser of our QPU, which was recently announced. And with IBM, we just announced a partnership where we will integrate our quantum capabilities with their quantum capabilities as well as their traditional HPC capabilities. And we have just delivered a QPU. So let me wrap it up quickly. Quantum computing is real today. What our mission is to solve business critical problems today. And what we're looking for is for you to challenge us with problems that really matter to you. And then we'll work with you to make that happen. With that, thank you very much for your time. Can I answer your question, please, sir? You had a question about it. It's a great question. So, we are starting first with, the question is, are you working with any fintechs for the example of the portfolio optimization that we talked about? Risk reduction, risk analysis, and risk diversification. At this point, we are focusing a lot on the banks that have a systematic problem. But in terms of fintechs, I think this is one of the things that we do want to encourage more and have more, engagement with that ecosystem as well. So, and this is part of what we're doing is getting the word out so that we can, do those collaborations. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Software, yeah. Yes, great question. So the way we think about this is, so there's the hardware layer, which is our QPUs. How do you want to program the QPUs? We have our own environment in which you can program that in a very visual way. And what we'll do is we'll assign a person from our company who will work with you to map the problem and also help walk you through how to use that environment or that studio in a sense. And on top of it, for the specific problem you're trying to solve, for example, if it's a specific condensed matter problem and you're trying to calculate, some energy levels or some sort of soft materials emergent properties, then we'll work with you to figure out exactly how to encode that in our analog computation. and then we work together. We collaboratively work together, solve the problem, and then we'll probably give you more ideas on, well, what about this direction, that direction, and we can build the flywheel. So, and this is very necessary for us to build that partnership as well. So you had a
Actually,
question there.
we'll do more questions in the panel,
Okay,
so there'll be
sorry.
plenty of time after.
Okay,
But
great.
let's thank
Thank you.
Wasiq again.
Thank you very much.
And next up, we have Manuel, our local CEO, CEO at Tau Systems.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Will. Thanks a lot. Also, thanks for inviting me a second time. I forgot to update the title slide. This is from Quantonation San Francisco event. Rest of the talk's updated though. It's been a few months. Great pleasure. I want to talk about shrinking particle accelerators because that's what we do. And then the question is, well, why? Particle accelerators are the largest machines that we have ever built as a society, and arguably some of the most complex ones. And they've figured by now, after 70 years of having them, pretty much every modern high-tech problem they had a hand in it somewhere. And they are fantastic machines. I mean, I remember as an undergrad student visiting what at the time was not the Large Hadron Collider, but the Large Electron Positron Collider at CERN, which is in the same tunnel, was the predecessor machine. It's this 27-kilometer tunnel under Switzerland and France, and it has 4 detectors, each one the size of an office block. Costs are, of course, staggering. The Higgs paper, they discovered the Higgs boson with the LHC, of course. It has 5,000 co-authors just on one paper. Fantastic machines, absolutely fascinating. But for me, it was, well, this is just a little, how can we make them more useful? And also as an undergrad student, I didn't want to work on something where you're one of 5,000 people and you never know where your input is and if you're ever going to have it. And so really early on, the question was, okay, can we make these smaller? And well, actually, that's the next one. That's the one that they would like to build. And so, and that's 100 kilometers. That's the next ring. That's the future circular collider. Estimated cost somewhere around 50 billion euros. Not sure that's ever going to happen. As a student, I found a paper actually published in '79 by John Dawson and Toshi Tajima on how you could use a laser to shrink particle accelerators. Now, I'm sorry to say I never met John Dawson. He passed away in the early 2000s. But Toshi and I actually have met, became good friends and co-authors on multiple papers. And they had this idea that if you can take a very strong laser and shoot it into a plasma, you can make much, much, much stronger fields, and you can use that to accelerate particles. Great idea. The problem at the time is that was '79. I was just starting elementary school then. The problem at the time was that laser did not exist. Now, by the time I graduated elementary school and grammar school and university and became a grad student, now that laser did exist. And so this is actually what I applied my research career to. And the trick that we basically have, and that is underlying all of this, is in a normal accelerator, you build this out of copper, you build this out of metal. And so you put an electric field on this, it's a radio frequency field typically, and you can only make it so strong, because if you make it stronger, you start damaging the metal. You get little lightning discharges inside that structure, and you just start damaging your machine. You can't go beyond that. Now, so what we do is we take this metal and we replace it with a plasma. A plasma is the fourth state of matter. You start with solid, you heat it up, you melt it. You heat it up further, you vaporize it. You heat it up even further, you get a plasma, which means you're ripping the electrons off the atoms. Once you've done that, you really can't damage it any more than that. So we can really put much, much stronger fields inside a plasma than in anywhere else. And we use ultra-high intensity lasers to produce those fields. And they can be 10,000 times stronger than anything you can hold in a conventional particle accelerator. And that means to get to the same particle energy, you can do it in a distance that's 10,000 times shorter. And just see if we can get that. Oh, sorry, started. Just to show how this works, if I can get this start. No, it won't start. Sorry, be right back. Actually, skip forward here a little bit, make up for time. So we're building these machines that we hope will be, that will be basically the size of a large industrial machine, shipping container. The smaller ones you fit on the stage. We have a gas cell. We have a little accelerator cell. We have a metal plate there. We have a blade with a small laser. We make some nanoparticles, aluminum or silver, just as catalysts. But then we flow helium inside that cell. It takes up the nanoparticles. It distributes itself through the cell homogeneously. And then when we have this mixture, we shoot in our very strong ultra-high intensity laser. And that laser pulse, it's very tightly focused, 1/10 the diameter of a hair, and it's also about that short, about 30 femtoseconds. It plows through the plasma and draws a plasma wave behind it, very much like a boat going across a lake, pulling a wake behind it. And just as people can surf that wave, electrons can surf the plasma wave, and they get pulled along, and the fields there are gigavolt per centimeter. So they get, in just a few millimeters, they get hundreds of mega electron volt energy or a few giga electron volt in a few centimeters. And this is how we can really shrink this down and make this machine very compact. And so if you look at, this is on the left side, this is SLAC, this is the Stanford Linear Accelerator. It can accelerate electrons to about 10 GeV in about 2 miles. Here in Texas, in our lab at UT, we've done this in here. This is our accelerator. And I'm embarrassed to say I lost one at the last event. It's so small, you can lose it. So cheap, you can lose it too. Now, admittedly, the laser is a little larger and a little more expensive, but this is the accelerator cell. Laser goes in to one side, drives that plasma wave through here, very high energy electrons come out the other side. So that's really it. Now, why would we do this? You can use particle accelerators. As I said, for pretty much everything that we do in modern life, there is some connection there. Of course, scientific research, but medical applications, security, industrial, food. Particle accelerators crucially drive our brightest X-ray sources that we know how to make. So as first applications for us, and I'll come to a few details there, we're actually looking at radiation testing of electronics, and we'll start this, where we have started this really, and then X-ray 3D imaging of chips and components. We have on the more of the research side with UT, have some collaborations into medical, and maybe we can get into this in the questions. But the first big one we're aiming for right now is 3D imaging of chips, because with compute, I mean, of course, we want to keep Moore's Law alive, we want to go smaller, 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 but the other thing now is we want to start building chips up in 3D. We want to integrate GPUs on CPUs and memory on CPUs and memory on GPUs and in many, many layers. Well, that's great, but if you want to build in 3D, you have to be able to look in 3D to see if what you build actually works. This is how we do this today. This is one from Zeiss. Bruker has a similar machine. The problem is one measurement takes 16 hours. So you can do failure analysis, but you can't really do inline metrology, which is what you need if you really want to produce in mass. Now, our machine is about 1 billion times brighter than this. And so we can do that same measurement in under a minute. And so that is the, now we're basically at the point where Zia was, we have the proof of concept, the proof of demonstration in the lab. Now, and that's the big task ahead of us, we have to make an industrial product out of it that can then actually do this where the customer wants, in a fab rather than an R&D facility. And we're pushing forward with that. This is one of our prototype images from our prototype machine here in Austin. One image, taking one image takes 20 femtoseconds. So now the question is, how many images can you take? How fast? Because for a full 3D reconstruction, you need about 1,000 images. So we think is that we can do this in principle in about 10 seconds, but in practice with detector and all the engineering challenges may take a little longer. The other thing we just started actually is radiation testing for electronics. Whenever you send something into space, it will see radiation, and you need to engineer for that, because if you don't, it won't work. The fastest radiation-hardened CPU is from BAE Systems, that red 5545 there. It's somewhat slower than a Pentium 3. It's 30 years behind. You want to do AI in space? Well, you can't. It doesn't have the compute power. Now, we would love, of course, to put an NVIDIA chip into space and have that working there, but it won't, because, well, maybe in low Earth orbit, but there it won't survive very long because it deorbits. So if you go in high Earth orbit, now you have that radiation. You can test for that in 2 facilities in the US, Brookhaven and Berkeley National Labs, about 1,000 hours of test time per year. Missile defense alone wants 12,000 hours per year, so huge gap. We have developed a paradigm where we can use our small machine to do the tests that they do on the big accelerators right now, and we just signed a contract with JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab, and NASA to basically prove out this paradigm, do the first tests, and have a few other industrial partners there as potential customers to work with us to get data and comparison and make sure they get the data they want. And this is something we've shown on the prototype here in Austin. We're putting together our first industrial prototype right now in San Diego and starting operations there next year. Long-term vision, we heard about quantum computing chips. Ultimately, it would be great if you can have it on a small silicon chip, single atom-sized qubits, and people have actually assembled that atom by atom with atomic force microscopes. Quite impressive, quite cool. Not really ready for mass production. We can use our light sources to drive an X-ray laser, an EUV or a soft X-ray laser. Very much like a synchrotron or a free electron laser at Stanford, just as bright, just a lot smaller. There have been very cool experiments at Paul Scherrer Institute that have shown that you can actually use a very bright EUV or even better soft X-ray beam to do lithography that would allow you to assemble quantum spin bits. Now, very, very early fundamental research at this point. This is sort of a 10-year time horizon or so, but that kind of is one of the big visions. And we have, together with Lawrence Berkeley, actually started to operate as the first company in the world, a laser-driven free electron laser that can get us to a EUV and X-ray laser. And we've shown we actually get lasing right now, still in the optical at 400 nanometers blue, but we can do this research. We have a working prototype, and we can extend that toward 13.5 nanometer for conventional lithography, 6 nanometer, 4 nanometer, 1 nanometer, to keep driving down the wavelength, keep driving up the resolution. And we just skip that. And if we really get the energy up and can drive it into the hard X-ray, 10 keV or so, now we open up an application that they right now can pretty much only do in 2 facilities worldwide. This is the linear coherent light source at SLAC and the EuroXFEL in Hamburg. And that is single molecular imaging, protein structure imaging for proteins in vivo that you don't have to cryofreeze. And even more than that, you can make movies and you can observe them folding. And of course, we all know, and computation is great. Up there, this is an AlphaFold model prediction of a protein, and then below is the actual measurement. The computational algorithm will give you a fantastic starting point, but you still have to measure it at some point. And right now, I said there's one machine in the world, and if you don't have a Nobel Prize, good luck getting time on it. So this is something we aim to change. Medical applications. There's a very cool, and we can go into detail, there's a very cool application where we can use the ultra-short pulse nature, just 10 femtoseconds of our X-ray pulse, to drive a shockwave and get an acoustic image. The rub here is we can get a 3D image, like an X-ray tomograph, in one shot. A normal tomograph makes hundreds. So you can get a 3D image with a fraction of the radiation dose that you use for a normal CT. That obviously would make it a routine diagnostic. Another great application for the electron beam, and we're working with colleagues at MD Anderson on that, is what's called very high energy electron therapy. You can use the electron beam to do cancer therapy, and it can be as effective or so it looks right now, as proton therapy. But with our technology, the machine can be 10 times cheaper than a new proton cancer center. So you could get 10 machines for the price of one. And now, and this is the really cool thing, and we just got this. Unfortunately, I can't show this. I don't have the data to show it because we just got it last week. We can actually combine those two techniques, and we can get an image from the electron beam during the tumor irradiation, which means not only do we see where the tumor is, we see how much dose we deposit when we deposit it, and you can make a much, much more precise treatment plan. Now, this is all at the fundamental research level here, but putting that together will really give you a completely revolutionized treatment there. There will be. Might be a while. We just got the data, but yes, of course. So today, let me just rub up and then we'll get. So we have a prototype facility in Austin, one in Berkeley. We're building a new facility in San Diego. This is it. We're just putting components together, and hopefully we'll have first light on the laser before Christmas. And so the plan, we'll build radiation test centers right now. That's the application that's demonstrated and works. We'll use that to leverage our next big one, which is 3D high-speed metrology for chips. And we'll leverage that to go to the FEL, lithography, and beyond. And right now, we are raising a seed round. Quantonation's leading it. Thank you very much. And there's still a little bit open left. So if you're interested, please come and talk to me. Thank you. And we'll do questions later.
Great. So our last speaker in the lightning talk session is Noel, the CEO of Qunnect.
Okay. Can you hear me? Seems like it's not. Okay. Yeah. All right. So my name is Noel Goddard. I am the CEO of Qunnect. We're a Brooklyn-based startup company that does quantum communications. What is that? Well, quantum communications is the idea of using the physical principles of quantum to better things like secure communications and to connect quantum computers in an image that you would think of something like today's internet. So they call that the quantum internet. And we've been building solutions for the quantum internet for the last few years. The challenge, so the challenge of all this types of quantum communications really goes back to a very simple concept. So when we think about digital communications, we have the advantage that we're riding off of 20 years of development that went from like the late 60s to the late 80s. And then after that, we had another 10 to 20 years of application development, which gave us what we now consider to be sort of the great digital internet around us and all these applications. In order to do that, we needed to build hardware, we needed to have infrastructure, and we needed to have protocols. All of that relies on a technology that now we consider to be rather mature. For quantum to do the exact same thing, we need to solve a very simple problem first. That problem is being able to distribute quantum information over the network while maintaining the fidelity. Otherwise, there's no use for actually doing it with quantum. And that's exactly what Qunnect has solved over the past few years. If you can do that, you can start unlocking applications. So the most sort of real touchstone right now is the idea of doing secure networking. We all know that there are a tremendous amount of threats around us right now in terms of hacking of local networks. This idea of harvest now and decrypt later is a very powerful and dangerous tool which has been used by our adversaries already, and we don't know, in fact, many of you who are familiar with the SolarWinds attack of a few years ago, we still don't know what this is going to mean in terms of actual revenue lost and impact on society. But there are other very positive things that we can do right now with quantum communications, which you might not think of, and that's the idea of connecting quantum sensors. So this has become a very interesting and sort of, again, sentient topic because, as you've seen with the Ukraine conflict that's been going on, this idea of being able to do GPS blocking and spoofing on drones is a very big issue. And the idea of being able to have alternatives for being able to navigate are important, and quantum sensors give us those types of alternatives. You can actually array them, like in do any other type of sensor, and get more sort of position, navigation, and timing type of maps that are available. And of course, the typical sort of internet idea. So the idea of being able to connect quantum computers in order to do distributed computing and some of those applications. So the technology markets themselves, right, vary a lot in size. I think everybody's much more comfortable with the idea of thinking about all of the potential for quantum computing. Those are, of course, very big numbers. The numbers which I have here are numbers that are produced in a recent McKinsey report. But quantum networking is a natural complement to that. So the idea of quantum computers, of course, being able to give us more powerful computing, power to solve problems, to create new materials, to create new drugs, et cetera, that's all great. But at the other side, we also need to be thinking about how can we actually start connecting those computers in order to solve even bigger problems. And something that's happening right now in the quantum computing space is that people are becoming much more aware of the idea that single QPUs are challenged to be able to get enough qubits to solve the problems which we want them to be able to solve. So wouldn't it be great if we could string together a lot of those QPUs in order to be able to use them as a distributed computing cluster? That's something quantum networking has the promise to do. And then, of course, the sensing application that I mentioned before. Of course, these are dominated by government. This is who uses technologies first in this type of space. So government and defense are both highly invested in these fields. But that's how technology gets developed, right? And then the next step along the lines is we start to think of some of the consumer applications. So Qunnect started off as a quantum memory company. We use an atomic vapor, rubidium. It's the same atomic molecules that you actually see in atomic clocks, right? Which are used to time all sorts of things across networks even today. So we use that same atomic vapor to generate entangled photon pairs, to store entangled photons in our quantum memories. And importantly, we also use them as a reference point in every single one of our network nodes so that we have high precision references for both wavelength and also for the types of photons which we use in order to communicate. So we commercialized the world's first quantum memory in 2021. Quantonation was actually one of our very first investors. We were their very first US investment in 2019. And it was, in fact, for that quantum memory technology that spun out of a university, Stony Brook University, one of the state schools in New York. We would then go on to commercialize a whole suite of instruments, and one of them is our entanglement source. It's really a unique entanglement source on the market. It's got significantly higher spectral brightness than anything that anyone else is producing right now. We thought about problems differently because we wanted very much to solve this problem of how could you create a suite of instruments that sits in a rack, just like you see every other type of sort of server racks that do communication today. And then finally, in our last round, we actually showed how we could plug all of this into a rack in a facility and then plug it into a network, which we've now built in New York, and show that it works. So meet our Q rack. We're rather proud of it. The very first one just went out to a customer in July. We've been engineering the components which you see in that Q rack for the past 4 years. They're responsible for doing the very basic functions that you think about in networks. So we generate entanglement, we preserve entanglement as we distribute it, we validate it on the other side, and we have control software, which allows anyone that has a set of fiber and wants to build a testbed today to build protocols. And that's exactly how all of the digital networks started as well. So these were designed for the real world. They're completely telecom compatible. That's a big deal in quantum because a lot of quantum doesn't happen at telecom naturally. It's in standard housing, of course. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the important things about the physical system that we chose is it actually allows you to be able to synchronize over long distances because everything is referencing those atoms that I mentioned before. So this year we have just under 2 million in orders for actual hardware. This is a huge number for a quantum company. So most of that is components, but we also have 3 racks which we're delivering as well. Our outlook in the years ahead is that we're starting now with this rack system, which basically empowers testbeds to be able to develop protocols. But as we go forward, the next few steps are to develop the protocols ourselves. So the first ones are cybersecurity, because as I mentioned, defense and government are very interested in the output of what these things can do. We have developed a protocol which we're now trying to put into the rack itself called CyberNet, which basically turns the entire network into a big sensor. It's one of the world's most accurate sensors for looking for tapping. So the idea of being able to, again, prevent things like those harvest now decrypt later attacks is something which is one of the great application uses for quantum networking. And then as we look towards what the future will be, quantum networks today are rather short. They call them metropolitan scale, because one of the challenges in quantum is how are you going to actually repeat information without destroying it, because if you look at information in quantum, you change it. So there is such a thing as a quantum repeater, and that in fact is what we started off as a company trying to do. Quantum memories are critical to being able to build repeaters, and we're actually in the second generation of our quantum memory now. We sold 5 of our first one, and now we have a second generation, which we're just about to publish a paper on, which is a very good match to all of the instruments in the rest of our product suite, and we're looking forward to building that into another rack system. So here's a little snapshot of what we've actually done in New York. This is a map, so New York is laid out in 5 boroughs. We sit on the edge of Brooklyn, which is the little purple dot there in the center. We have a very large 34-kilometer loop. This was commercial fiber, pre-existing in the ground. There are cables that have hundreds of fibers that carry normal digital data traffic. We leased fibers that we had fused together in order to create this loop. The same thing for another set of fibers that runs from our facility over into Manhattan to New York University. And then a third set of fibers which now run to a data center in the old Western Union building, which is one of the largest co-location facilities in the United States. So on the 34-kilometer loop, we did something that no one has ever seen before. We actually turned all of our equipment on to start distributing entanglement through this 34-kilometer loop. And we saw how fast can you push it while maintaining very high fidelity and 24/7 operation. And what we learned is we were able to actually preserve 500,000 pairs per second, which is like huge numbers, thousands of times more than what anyone's been able to do in other academic papers. But we could do it keeping our network on for more than 2 weeks at a time, 24/7 operation, 99% network uptime, and 99% fidelity. These numbers look like networks. They don't look like experiments. And that was a big moment for us because we're really trying to build something that is going to support applications, not something which is just another proof of concept. If you'd like to read about it, there's in one of those, oops, sorry, going the wrong direction. How do we get back? Can you snap back on the slides? There's a reference to a paper that's down there for physical review letters. You can also look up Qunnect. Of course. Yeah, so the question is, can you do wireless entanglement communication as versus fiber-based, which is what we are right now. So you can do free space communication like you would do to a satellite. Wireless, as you're thinking of it going through wireless routers, et cetera, doesn't handle photons the same way. So our idea of entanglement is a pair of entangled photons. You can certainly do that through telescopes to and from satellites or to and from other telescopes over free space. But we happen to be doing it in fibers because it's, when you're doing it one photon at a time, it's actually easier to do it when you know where the photons are. But we have done demonstrations with the TNO, which is one of the Dutch aerospace agency, between 2 telescopes with our equipment as well, which would, be a precursor to satellites. Yes? Yeah, so the question is there interest from high-frequency traders on Wall Street as an application? We just signed an NDA with JPM. Yeah, but it's not for that. So one of the things which I think that people have been very concerned about in the finance world is that the entire world is governed by keys, effectively. So if you have a one-time pad or anything else which governs a transaction, you want to know that it's absolutely secure. Quantum networking doesn't win on speed today. What it wins on is security. And that's basically what we've been pushing on for the past however many years, has been to basically say, if I could protect your transmission with an ultra-secure key, what's that worth to you, right, in terms of a type of application? Keys also govern all of the other types of e-commerce around us, so we've certainly seen a lot of interest there. The service providers, so we have applications now with Deutsche Telekom and Cisco. We're also very interested in that space. Yes. Yeah, so the question is, did we share the fiber for the experiment in Gotham Q or not? So it's currently running on dark fiber, but we've actually learned how to multiplex now. So everything that we're doing right now is actually in the O band. It's not hard to multiplex because of that. We've chosen not to just because we were trying to understand the noise thresholds, but it can be, yes. Yes? Yeah, so it's the same question, but it's a good one. So the idea is, can you just use what's in the ground today? Which the answer is yes. That's how we engineered the system. So these are pre-existing fibers, and actually the ones in New York, some of the oldest segments are from the 80s. So they aren't sort of a new type of cleaner, better fiber. So you can use the one which is there today. The dark fiber question is, can you do other data traffic on it at the same time? Because we all know that the amount of fiber that people put in the earth right now is finite, and we're starting to press those limits as we're going into 5G and 6G. So no one wants to have one channel on one fiber. So if quantum has its own little fiber going through the rest of the earth, right, that's not an efficient use of bandwidth. So right now we operate on a different wavelength, but something which is compatible with fiber. So we are in the O band. Most fiber traffic is in the C band. We can also operate in the C band. Correct. Yes, but there's always these complications. So data transmission in quantum is with light particles. You want the particles that are good for your quantum message, but you don't want everything else, so you have to make sure you have very good filters. So it can be done, but there's always a higher noise if you're trying to put it on the same fiber. Yes. So the question is, can you use the digital TCP/IP type protocols on quantum, right? So right now you can't, but you can develop analogs, and that's no different than the quantum computing world did as well, right? So quantum computing programming is not, it's analogous to normal programming, but it's not the same thing. The same thing is true with quantum protocols for communication. So a lot of times for security purposes, the neat thing about quantum is that if I have a set of entangled particles, the relationship between them has been defined as absolute. They were created at the same time, and the relationship with them is defined by physics. Therefore, I can keep one and I can give one to you. If you look at yours, you know what I have, and vice versa. This becomes very powerful when you're building a protocol that leverages that relationship in order to do something like security. And again, those protocols are built differently because you're talking about pairs now instead of having one of two. Speed of light, the same, right? It's literally, you're just using fiber, right? Yeah. So this is just a sort of landscape slide because I think it's important not to show necessarily the differences with Qunnect and others, but the fact that there's so many companies which are now in the quantum space, in quantum networking, in fact. So everybody who's at the bottom that have recently spun out companies, Quantonation has invested in a large number of these. They're all looking at three different sort of categories here. Short distance networking, which is similar to what everybody's doing now in quantum networking today. Long distance networking, which is interfacing things which will become these quantum repeaters. And then this idea of distributed sensing and computing is very powerful. And in fact, the idea of connecting QPUs, right, is critical now to our ability to be able to scale quantum computers. So Qunnect is raising cash. This is the one thing about quantum companies, which always seems to be a real truth. So what we're doing is we're really funding ourselves to go over the barrier. We've spent the last 4 years de-risking products. We now have a rack. It's time to de-risk the market. And we have a number of strategic partnerships which are helping us do that right now, both with government and with private industry. What we want to do is then develop protocols which are specific to the use cases, which is all part of de-risking the products for real-world applications. And if you're interested in that, please come and talk to me in the second session.
Great, let's thank Noel. Jason, why don't you come on up and we'll start the panel. So, why don't you keep this?
Yes. Okay. Good. All right, we're good. One of the things for time, there is the networking after, so we're not going to do a Q&A, just so that we can kind of have these guys talk or fight or whatever we can get. Yeah. We'll see as we kind of go. All right, so one of the things I want to start off with, I want to kind of have everybody, again, kind of tell what their company does. And the biggest thing that I'm asking also is, what's kind of like the second order effect that'll happen if you get mass adoption of what your company is doing? And a key thing here is I'm a bio guy, so I got through AP Physics in high school. And so the math kind of stopped. So to put it in a case that someone like me can actually understand. Do you want to start us off?
Well, since you just heard from me, this is the easy part, right? So we're building the quantum internet. The impact it's going to have on the world is that it's going to basically protect all of your transactions going forward. I mean, think about everything that we do right now that could be vulnerable to hacking and security problems. If quantum communication actually works, this protection, right, starts to protect all of the things which we've come to take for granted. And we no longer have to think about hacking.
So my name is Whurley. We have a company called Strangeworks based here in Austin, and we're basically eliminating all of the barriers to getting companies to use this. So the pricing barrier, the need for a physicist or a scientist or even developers, and basically just focus on reducing that and getting as many people using the technology as possible.
Yeah, Manuel. So we shrink particle accelerators, and if we successfully do that, right? I mean, just think back. The first computers were the size of a building, and now we all carry them around in our pocket, and we use them for things that nobody imagined at the time. And the same is true for what we do. If we can successfully shrink particle accelerators and even make them the size of a normal machine, and now any company, any small university, any country that currently can't even afford a particle accelerator, because that's how expensive they are, can use them, then and they get used in pretty much every endeavor of research, from bio to chemistry to material science, energy, solar, computation, everything. Medical, drugs. Yeah, I mean, and that's really what we want. We want to democratize access and push them out there so everybody can have them.
So I'm Wasiq Bokhari with PASQAL. We are solving problems using quantum computation that cannot be solved through traditional computation or generative AI. The secondary effect of that, obviously, well, the primary effect of that is it's analogous to what happened to the world once computation was invented. It changed the world. When we have a new paradigm of computation like quantum computation, then it will change the world yet again. The secondary effect to that is, hopefully, number one, it makes us a dominant company, one of the leading tech companies in the world. But second is that hopefully we can solve many problems that are considered unsolvable all across various domains, and that will make lives better for everyone.
So I kind of joked with the fact that it's hard for someone to understand, and communication in whether it be quantum and physics tech and deep tech is actually a real issue. And especially since a lot of times you're the likely expert sitting across the table, whether it's a room full of laymen, whether it's other people in the field or investors. And I can tell you, as an investor, getting a technical presentation is the worst possible thing, right? I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Why is this actually important? So how do you really think about and approach communication in such a deep and technical field?
Actually, Strangeworks is really interesting for this. So we have an expert, but at the same time, so one of the things we did early on, and this was funny because when we first pitched Quantonation, obviously we were pitching a group that actually had quantum expertise, because at the time Christophe was doing a lot of the diligence on the front end. What we found very helpful actually was using educational animation. One of the things which I think everybody has really started to rely on visual learning so much more in the last 10 years. And I think it's a really powerful tool for being able to demystify some of the concepts and also drive home some of the salient points about your technologies.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I like to think of it this way. If you're in quantum, right, which we all are, and your service, your machine, whatever, requires a physicist to be at the company, or somebody really great at computer science, if you took all of the people related to research in the entire planet, you projected out a few years and said we'll be 8 billion people, still less than 0.1% would be capable of doing that job. So you have almost no addressable market today, which is kind of where we come in, which is you have to have the whole fact that you're communicating it is the problem. You think it's hard to get that technical pitch as an investor? Try it as a customer. The number one thing all of our customers say is, thank God. Just like we have a problem we want to solve. Could you talk about the problem? Nobody cares if it's, they look, enterprise buys because it's better, faster, cheaper. That's it. If you're going to CIO and you're pitching them with linear algebra and you tell them about the quantum mechanics, you've lost them in the first few seconds. And they also, the person writing those big checks you want, they always want to be the smartest person in the room. So you never want to do that, right? You don't want to big dog them on that. And so, you know, what we've tried to do is think about it in the evolution of technology. So if you look out not even 50 years, not even 30 years, probably 10 to 20, and it could be a lot faster, there won't be applications. The network layers will not work the same. I mean, go back to 1959, Jack Kilby invents the integrated circuit. Before that, you bought transistors one at a time. Early 60s, Iris and everybody introduced APL, a programming language, because the way to program a computer is to talk math, because that's what they do. Since then, all we've done is added more and more room for failure, more and more layers of abstraction, and we're not getting it to where, you know, these things can be mass adopted. I mean, you mentioned democratizing stuff. I mean, it's kind of what we claim. When we first came out, we said humanizing quantum, right? But you have to be able to go in and not talk about your technology. You don't want to sell the features. You want to sell the benefit. Here's the technology I have. Here is what your problem is. Here's how my technology solves your problem. How does it work? Don't worry about it. Like, literally, they would appreciate that.
All very good points, very good points. And let me add to that. I mean, what I tell my students. So I still teach, and Jason, I'm teaching physics for med students this semester. If you want to come, if a pre-med can understand it, I'm sure you can.
I stuff. It's all literally Greek to me.
Tuesdays,
You know?
Thursdays, 8 to 10. No, ask questions. I mean, and this is of course always hard to get people to ask questions, but ultimately that's the key. Only you know what you don't understand or what you would like to understand better. Ask questions. And of course, pitches are sometimes rushed. We try, I mean, an active thing. I try to schedule meetings that are a little longer because it just makes things, if you have time, if you're not rushed, if you feel you can actually ask questions, and there are plenty of questions around this. The stuff is complicated. And then repeat. Do multiple meetings. Do it again and do it again. I mean, somebody said, and of course, there's people out there on the internet who will tell you that you can become a concert pianist in a day. Well, you can't. It doesn't work that way, and this is for everything that's reasonably complex. You just gotta keep at it. I mean, keep it simple, of course, without, I mean, you break it down, you try to use analogies a lot. We try to do that, but you don't want to be wrong. I mean, obviously, the more you simplify it, the more deviation you have, but you still want to keep the key facts straight, and you don't want to overpromise. You want to be realistic, and so expectation management, but then just take time and repeat it.
How does that all translate though into the model of, you said longer meetings and pitches, but in today's, and I don't mean this negatively, but in today's meme culture and bite size and social media, how do you bring down concepts as complicated as this into that realm that if you want to be able to scale and the types of things that we're talking about here, you have to be able to communicate in that language?
It makes it hard. It makes it hard. And one of the things I keep saying, hardware, we're building hardware, and that is hard. It's not an app, and you got to manage, I think you got to manage expectations. Building a machine like this is not as fast and as cheap as writing a new app. It is just not. And if that's what you're after, then that won't work, right? So it's also picking the right audience, right? Because on the other hand, I very strongly resonate with what Will said. We want to get the things done that really help us and really make life better. We got to do the hard stuff. The easy stuff, well, everybody does that anyway.
You know, what's that saying? I think it's attributed to Feynman, that if you cannot explain or describe something simply, you don't understand it. So, and I think that is the hardest thing. And so that's the first thing I would share is, you know, if you truly understand it, you will be able to describe it without loss of fidelity, too much loss of fidelity. The second is, I think, in the end, I think you said it earlier, it doesn't matter how you solve a problem. Actually, you said it earlier. It doesn't matter how you solve a problem, as long as you solve it and you solve somebody's problem. to the customer or to the investor or to a partner, it's a black box. So I think that is a really important point, because instead of being driven by technology, be driven by the problem you're solving and really get that clear up front. Which brings me to my third point. The majority of startups fail not because they can solve an interesting problem. It's because they're solving 50 interesting problems. They're boiling the ocean. And because you have very little oxygen that you need to run on, so you need to pick one thing. And that selection process is very important. I remember, Jeff Bezos, one of the only things he talks about startups is focus. And the act of finding that focus is the hardest thing, because you have to let go of a lot of possibilities. And when you're talking to a customer, the first thing the customer is really looking for is, do you know what you're talking about? Have you picked one thing that you're going to be excellent in? Hopefully 10 times better than anybody else or any other smart people. And second, have you solved this problem for me or not? So I think getting those three things together has been very effective.
Well, so quantum's an interesting point. Was we talk, building off what you said, 10 times better, right? Because sometimes being 1.5 times, 2 times, maybe 10 times better is not even good enough to take out an incumbent, right? You got to be 100 times better. And quantum's been an interesting realm here about, is it coming? Is it here? Where are we at? So my question actually is we're thinking about the innovation and where we're going. Are we moving? Is it an incremental approach? Is it step functions? Is it something we're waiting for a single innovation to happen and then we're off to the races? What's going on?
Let me take a gander at that first, and I'll, give it to my smarter, co-panelists here. At least one of my views is, when you look at innovation, it's always incremental. We think about, when the airplane was invented, short flight, the actual architecture of the airplane is not what is the modern architecture. But they demonstrated proof of principle. And then there's all these decades during which various other companies came in, or endeavors came in, and they actually formulated what the airplane fuselage looks like, what the shapes look like, how do you control it, and so on and so forth. And now we have the airplane. But when we look backwards at it, it seems as if it came as a step function, which is not the case. So I think a very powerful way of innovation is engaging a specific problem with a specific customer who really has that problem, and working with them to solve it purely, totally, and completely, much better than anybody else. And that iterative cycle is innovation. It is I don't believe it's a step function. So what we are seeing here in quantum is that series of iterations happening. You're seeing that S curve, go from one level to the other level. And we are seeing different snapshots of that, in this panel over here.
So I think scientists see that, and I think quantum native people see that, and I think they see that because they're looking on a molecular level. If you back out even a couple of nanometers, let alone if you say that's somewhere down on the stage, it's arguable that the innovation has stopped. I just gave a presentation at Quantum World Congress. Since the year before when I talked there were 89 world's first announcements, world's greatest, world's most. There were 59 groundbreaking physics discovery, and there was over 200 gonna change the world in a year. If any of that were true, there would be a market. She wouldn't be having trouble raising money. I wouldn't be having that trouble. Nobody up here would be doing that. It would be flowing. Okay? If you go to 2014, you look at the cover of February's Time magazine, it says, quantum computing's coming, cancer will be cured in 2 years, everything's great. If you look at 2023's February cover Time magazine, it has IBM's quantum computer on it. The only difference is the graphics, and the story says the same thing. Okay? That's because the progress and the innovation that they're seeing, like at PASQAL and at other companies, doesn't matter to us. It's phenomenal. It's huge. It's definitely, you can say, demonstrably, measurably, this industry is moving forward. But this industry doesn't move forward until there's more collaboration, a lot more transparency on some of the science. You can't just be like, magic black box science, right? Like, as a CIO, I'm not going to buy that for any amount of money, right? And there's got to be, more importantly, time to value, right? All the things enterprises buy. So has there been progress? Yes. Does that progress matter in the market? Not at all. It's indistinguishable. I mean, as a CIO, I can't look at any of those announcements and go, this is the one, or this is the thing I should have my team dig on. And that's partially our fault in the community, because people are trying to share these amazing discoveries they've made, but that's not what the market is looking for. You know, I see all these standpoints, the market's worth $100 trillion and $5 billion, or maybe it's 2, or it could be 27. And the reason nobody knows is because right now you could very easily argue on the computing side, not your side. You have an actual real world, very demonstrable problem.
You know
We're
all
kind of a
those TAMs are made up.
We're kind of a technology. Yeah, I mean, I saw a quantum company with a $50 trillion TAM last month. I saw their presentation. That's insane. Okay, Apple doesn't have a $50 trillion TAM. But to give it over to you, you know, I just want to say, like, there is progress. You have to understand what lens you're looking through it. If I'm looking through the lens of a quantum scientist, of somebody really, wow, there's amazing stuff happening, without a doubt. If I'm looking through the lens of, I want to put a quantum computer in my Fortune 500 company, it just sounds like a bunch of bullshit, right? Hundreds of advancements. Why am I not using it already? Why is it not more? So it's really important to understand the context and the lens you're looking at it through, because all too often, people on the business side or too critical science side don't give them enough credit, and vice versa, right? So it's really important that we have a lot more education, a lot more collaboration on, you know, I agree with what you said. Our entire business model, everybody laughed. Oh, you only have 2 customers? Oh, you only have 5 customers, right? We're 7 years old. Now we have a couple dozen. But we did exactly what you suggested. We found the right customers in the right industries, and we focused on their problem and only solving their problem. I didn't care about 1,000 customers in pharma. I cared about J&J. They're my customer, massive problems. Let's solve that. And we did. And they came back and they bought more, and they bought more, and they bought more, just like you're saying. I think that has absolutely nailed that approach.
One question.
I don't know. I may not, sir. Wait, I haven't decided if I'm allowing the question. Hang on. No, just kidding. Exactly. Nailed it. Nailed it. We don't know. We don't know, and we're still on the advanced research side, right? And we haven't converted. We haven't converted to applied research, right? I don't look at it by the verticals or that. I look at it by how many qubits do what math, right? So like right now, if you want to do combinatorial optimization, there's a ton of stuff you can do, and there's a ton of stuff. We're helping, you know, a large company redo their entire rail system supplies. We're helping energy companies with unit commitment problems. There's tons of stuff you can do on those machines today. You go into linear algebra, you want to go into differential equations, you want to go into factorization. Each of those are a few years out, right, behind each other. How many? I don't know. We could be one discovery from a quantum advance that really, you know, advances stuff. But like, you have to look at it by, look, it's like AI. AI is not magic, it's math. Okay, it's not really, it's an awesome parlor trick, but it's still a parlor trick. So if you break these things down to first principles and you look at it, you say quantum computers and quantum inspired computers, where programs where you're taking a quantum inspired algorithm and running it on a GPU or whatever, those are useful today in combinatorial optimization. Outside of that, probably not a lot. But that's okay, because you know what the TI-99 4A I learned how to program on was useful for? Jack shit. Okay, but that's the thing, is from Jack Kilby inventing the integrated circuit to where we are now with the iPhone, right? That's all going to happen with these new sets of technologies, and not just quantum, but a heterogeneous platform around quantum and DNA and everything in a fraction of the time. Like there's a watershed moment coming, like literally in the next year or two. And I've been holding off. I mean, we knew we were too early. We have a 25-year plan. What did I tell my investors? There'll be no revenues. They said, for how long? I don't know, 5 years, 10 years? I don't know, somewhere in there. And by the way, not every investor is comfortable with that. I don't care, right? Because the thing that I want to make sure everybody is doing in quantum is being very transparent and very realistic and very open about where things are at. When you do that, you can build the relationships. right? You can get the CIO that goes, all right, I get it. Let me put a little bit of budget. But I interview 100 CIOs every year on quantum. That's my gig. I can tell you top 3 pharmaceutical budgets for quantum this year: 400K, 150K, 50K. All right. I can tell you we have
real money right there.
We have several. I'm rich. We have several military companies. Contract. I can go through all of them. I can tell you, there's not $20 million amongst 100 companies. So we don't have an industry yet. That's real. We are on the verge of one of the greatest industries in the history of our species. That's also true. The timing thing is where people are going to get caught up. And I think most of the companies that started 5-7 years ago, they're out of business. I think 2025 sees a lot of quantum companies go away because a lot of people were entrepreneurs and they weren't quantum physicists. And, you know, I met Will, one of the first people I met in quantum, and he was like, whoa, slow down there. And I was like, all right, I'm going to listen to these guys and Christophe and everybody. And you go, okay, it's important to know where it is and what you can actually do with it. A lot of people read that Time magazine article, went out, talked to a VC, got funding. It's like all of those companies are gone. They're going to be dead, right? Because they built something based on bad data. They were like, oh, I assume it's here, or it's in a year or two. I can make it a year or two. It might be 5 years, it might be 7.
Manuel, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, let me come at this from a little different angle, maybe, because there were interesting examples you pointed out there, right? Like, okay, computers and video games and internet and so on, but of course it's true. But they are very specific lens, and it's a lens, and this is also something that we have to deal with in the VC community. They're a lens. This is all things that are addressed to an end customer. You're selling a widget. Which is not what everybody does, right? It's not what we do. It's there's a company out there called ASML. Nobody knew about that company until Chip Wars came out, basically. ASML has a market cap of 350 billion euros. And they have a monopoly. And they sell a machine that is $500 million per machine. And it takes 8 747s to transport. Are you ever going to buy a machine like that? No. Do they run ads, really? No. That's not how their whole business model works, right? There is a whole, and the same could be said for many other large industrial type things, right? Are you gonna buy an oven to smelt steel? No, right? Still, there's companies out there that make this, and they have customers. So but of course, we focus on the things we tend to know from our private experience, and this is iPhones, this is things we buy, right? But there's a very different side out there. And arguably, that is what gives us the big structural improvements to society, to quality of life, and all that, right? I mean, yeah, sure, video games are fun, but did they contribute to our risen life expectancy? Could probably argue the opposite, but won't.
But I think you're hitting on a great point right now, though, is the horizontal technology and the infrastructure stack is what's changing. And I think post-COVID, that there's almost been a vibe shift towards that. Now, some of it we've seen from technology perspective. I mean, there's a reason NVIDIA is driving the market caps it's driving because it is the infrastructure layer of AI right now, right? As you said, ASML, I had never heard of it 5 years ago. And of course, as you were presenting, I leaned over to Whurley and said, I'm like, is he taking on ASML? Like, was the first thing I said. So I think that is, so have you all felt this vibe shift recently in that the horizontal technologies are becoming, whether it's a mental shift, whether it's just the technology stack is suddenly open now because of these inventions that have occurred right now?
So one thing that I wanted to add to the conversation we're just having and flows over into this one is this idea of what is the pace of innovation? And I think that what we've seen because of the proliferation of VC and deep tech space, right? It's obviously all over biotech as well, right? Is that there are formulas for winning and there are expectations of LPs. I mean, this is a business after all, right? But it also ended up transforming our expectation of the innovation cycle. And I think that it's when we went out and first started pitching, we had to look for funds that were patient, right? This is the famous words, right? Very often they'll call them sort of long horizon funds or frontier funds or hard tech funds. I mean, they all have, again, or pioneer tech funds. But the idea would be that they were patient enough for the cycle of innovation to happen rather than what has become a custom, right, in this situation. But what technology evolution has taught us over and over and over again is that very often things are not, I mean, as you're talking about the stack, right, invented in isolation, and then the single company does everything around it. When we first started pitching, trying to build an entire hardware suite, we took our risk profile to a VC from like something that was somewhat manageable with a single instrument that was hard to unimaginable with 6 instruments that you needed to do, and you have to wait for them to all come to fruition, and you have to wire them together, and they have to work, that you're going to build a stack. And that was a very hard vision for a lot of people to stomach. So what did we do? We went back to the grant world and found, you know, grants allow you to have the risk profile that investors can't take on, and they have to be patient, right? I mean, this idea of you have to be patient for innovation to actually be realized. If you want it to be realized where it's actually high quality technology that actually can serve use cases, you have to not get lost in the hype. And what unfortunately has happened is that people wanting to meet the expectation of investors have gone into this hype extreme, and quantum is well into that problem, right? I think you'll get that from all of us here, right? Yeah, I mean, but it's wildly frustrating because then it ends up having the backlash of correction and skepticism. But I think that, you know, people who are really committed to trying to build the stack for real and actually solve the problems by creating technology which can be tested and can actually be used by others in the community for real feedback, it's like every other technology innovation. It's important, and it will actually be the foundation for the revolution.
You're looking at everybody that would have been in the homebrew compute club back in the day, and that's about where we're at. I think that's fair.
I mean, one way I can answer your question, and maybe tie back to your question earlier, is so our revenue numbers, without giving any details, are in 8 figures. Our revenue numbers are in 8 figures. Our bookings are obviously higher than that. This is a very tangible, quantitative way of measuring the vibe. And if you just look at the actual hardware sales that are happening around quantum hardware, those numbers are very large. Now, why are these companies, the end customers, investing in that, right? They clearly understand that regardless of where it stands right now, it is something that is worth investing in because they don't want to be left behind. And what is it that they're afraid of not being left behind about? Because people understand that there are very important class of problems that we can solve even today that are not solvable otherwise, number one. And number two, if this platform becomes ubiquitous, then they don't want to be on the back foot. And they don't want to be there. So I think it is, maybe we should not think from a scarcity point of view. Because an analogy here would be that when compute started decades and decades ago, the numbers were small and there were specialized applications. But people invested, and that investment made the industry, defined the problems that made the industry. That's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. And the homebrew club, I think, is a very good analogy to it because it depends on how big is this homebrew. I mean, homebrew means it could still be tens of billions of dollars or billions of dollars, right? Because the world economy is much larger now. NVIDIA is 20 years old. Earlier question, what is the killer app? They were doing gaming. And before that, NVIDIA almost died multiple times, right? And it's only when other innovation came together that you found that what they're solved in another way could really solve the transformer and, you know, doing the LLMs really, really well. And now that opens an entirely new field for them. And they're thinking about the 3-computer problem and so on and so forth. It's a really interesting way that the world is developing. And I think that's the way we should think about quantum computing as well. So the initial applications are going to be limited by our imaginations. As people interact with them, they will discover new areas, and smarter, better ideas will come out of that. And that is the flywheel that we will build. And that's our job, to get the ball rolling.
All right. So everyone's going to have a chance to attack all the panelists and ask them plenty of questions. So for the final question, and I'm going to limit you all to like 1 sentence because I know you can give entire dissertations on this question. But what's next for quantum and physics tech? Or we'll get silence.
What happens to all tech, right? Everybody keeps referring to the iPhone. none of you give a shit about the fact that when I say, hey Siri, my voice is converted to a digital signal that is then turned into electrons and sent down to the bottom of the chip. You care that you can say, send my wife a text, I'm late, right? So what has to happen for quantum to take off as an industry, and there's just no doubt, because there's not enough of a market to sell if you're just selling to something that's science dependent, right? Is it has to become something that is consumable, and that's what happens.
Quantum becomes consumable. I hope so, right? I mean, in a lot of these fields, you're also seeing that quantum needs to be miniaturized in order to get the cost down for manufacturing. So one of the things which I think has been true across our industry is there's not been enough focus, and there was a slide today, right, on the fact that to actually make this into a business, you have to care about the manufacturing piece. So I'm hoping in the next 5 years, right, this changes and that the cost of quantum comes down so you can have those consumables.
Energy. Right now, there was just a few days ago, there was a big splash, even in the New York Times, that they are basically ramping up 3 Mile Island again just to run an AI computer. Right? All right. Is that a good idea? I don't know, but it's certainly something. Energy is the big thing. None of these AI things, none of these things will really do if we don't figure that out somehow. And there is not one magic bullet to do that. There is many things. This is better solar cells, better batteries, energy storage is going to be huge, energy grid distribution. If somebody can figure out room temperature, ambient pressure superconductors, that would be a bigger impact than anything else we could even talk about. Unfortunately, I don't quite know how to do that yet, right? But it goes back to efficiency.
Well, then what have you been doing this whole time?
Yeah. I'm just playing. I'm just wasting my life. I know. No, but I mean, but you see this. You had the phone there, right? Computers went from building size to on your desk to in your hand. I was for not so happy reasons, but I was in the hospital the other day, and usually they used to take you to the room where the X-ray machine is. That other weekend, they actually now rolled the X-ray machine into the room where you were sitting. That's progress. And I talked about a big X-ray machine. We have other means of making images. At some point, we have a tricorder. At some point, I'm not sure if I'm going to see it, but we are pushing towards this. So there's so many things and physics tech to push. Got colleagues here from UT that do amazing things, and it's all these different areas that right now are fundamental research coming together, and we can't predict how they will come together. There's like 4 or 5 that will combine to make something new and spectacular, but you don't know today which 4 or 5. But you have to keep doing it to find out, basically.
You know, I'll just, when you asked the question, I was just thinking about, let me say something slightly provocative. The world that we live in today, it is primarily built on the scale up of science that we did in 19th century or early part of 20th century. That's the world we live in today. Think about it. The internet is electromagnetism. There's a lot that we utilize is that. But there's something very interesting that happened in 20th century. We discovered the quantum nature of reality. But then in latter part of 20th century, we discovered how to control it and to make synthetic systems out of that. That's huge. That is the future. It's like unlocking the next level of control in the universe. And one way to think about that is nature itself is a quantum computer. Every process that happens is a quantum computation. And all of a sudden we have these keys on how nature computes itself. How will that change the world? It's immense. We're just beginning to discover it. But once we imagine that and we apply that to the future that will exist, we can see how big that transformation will be. So I think that's one provocative thought we should take away. But when that happens, to your point, technology disappears because I don't care how it happens. Just like I don't care why the chair stays on the floor, right? It just stays. It will become seamless and intuitive. The divide between us as humans and the technology that serves us should disappear. And that's the second big thing that happens when we mature. And that's what we are hoping to build.
Thank you all very much.
Great. Thanks to all our speakers. Thanks to Jason. Thanks to Capital Factory. I want to just say one quick thing here. So we invest in this kind of stuff, and I hope all of these companies looked hard and looked researchy. And that's because you have to be contrarian to really make wins in venture. The generationally important companies all looked weird. Investing in a private space company a few years after the tech bubble burst. Investing in a non-profit research lab in 2015. That's now OpenAI. So you're not pattern matching for other kinds of things. You want to find stuff that other people think are too hard, too complicated, the diligence is too weird. And we found a couple of those and talked about them here today, and we're finding more. So looking forward to talking to you all.
It's exactly the same thing.
So I had the task of daughter to one messenger. We legalized children, so children to scare. So that's why I was asking how do you interface?
They're very provocateur. I saw public interviews.
That's why we just at some point
The way we do these POCs, we start with
yeah, the limitations are how we so of course there's intuition to get started. You develop your models based off of some experimental data, some DMP, some theoretical computation. But at some point you have to have experiments but Gen AI
We're not taking care of the panelists how often you drink. And they should have interns running up and down. So I'm willing to do that. Not much quantum in there, but I'm wanting a tour of his laboratory. Have you taken one yet? I did one today. Oh wow, there we go. Very good. No, I wasn't. Oh.
Dr. Stapa is hello. And my wife Jenny is a good friend of Beyond. We moved, I moved here from Los Angeles as well. We arrived around. Good to see you. Wow, it's very interesting presentation. Oh, there's a particle accelerator. Wow, that's a big thing. That's a big thing. Great presentation about the she might talk about it.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I don't doubt that. No, I think that. No, but I was thinking of the oldest one. He was in tech. Still,
Why don't you hear the quality?
like right. Years. I mean, oh, and you're frankly like, oh, this is what I am. But you've established the brand. So the thing is, people who are jumping on it late won't have the credibility you have having been here as long. And you've been amending the soil for a long time. Yes.
Like, wow. Yeah, they're not because I see the promise, but then.
And it is closer to the nuclear future, which is getting close too. But it's like it's real.
We're very similar.
Yeah.
We're on a similar table. Are you still involved with your day to day?
But you're good to see you, man.
I'm a local bank. I think it's such a like make my day.
Yeah, that's hard like that. I'm gonna watch out. What? I feel like I'm there. This is like you're like.
You're in a rush? Pretty good. I don't want to take so much of your time. I understand smart speakers, right? All right. Thank you. First of all, I would like to make this next speaker. Even if you don't, like, but anyways, smart things, I understand. Like, one person, like, objects to do the business, right? Right now, we are not many. Right? Right. Right. So you only provided the quantum power. It's not only for the AI layer, or yeah.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say hi. Will, I've seen you in several presentations. Yeah, but I just wanted to come by and say, big supporter, and I'm glad for everything. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Still,
Yeah, just don't worry. You can provide the basically what the current on the current level. Right. For the Don't worry. Provided this, I
Another assembly for quantum, and like like assembly like the binary to information layer. What? So it uses the same.
So right now, we don't stop this to fix the channel.
Okay. Right. Which is why I thought you were.
I'm not saying it's Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. Fine. Have a good
You mind if I correctly? This person I'm getting close to it. Essentially, what I think is that limit our imagination. In terms of like what oh, AI, I think that's an anytime. And when it's limited by quality, it's just that stuff that breaks. And I was like, what's
So it's the same mathematical operation, not much faster.
trying to do that in a networking setting.
Like the same standards bodies are going involved in quantum computing, like you guys are going to be, or like is it going to be like some? No, you definitely need I got it. Airbus Ventures was our biggest and they're based out of where? Sure. Legal ones. They're not in like Toulouse.
If you do this, you will now be penalized. You now have to go through all of the secondary processes, fund the company, huge amounts of money and time. So these are the things to invest in.
Do you have a dark person?
We have a small dark segment.
I would go all in on drone. I've been brought in games, but the other thing is coding. You know, and like the history of early investment in computing is basically we want to kill more people, or we would like less arts will be killed algorithmically.
Something else in there, but it also are.
What
So we're just trying to go to the moon, actually.
Yes.
I'm just saying, it's just like it's something. I mean, it's something. That's kind of thing. It's fine. That's right.
No, but you're on both sides of it.
You guys over at Helium.
Our efficient tracing. The hardware is becomes gross as you learn, whatever. Let's plug into the universe and the reality of the universe. That's what I'm saying. That's what you saw is that there's the actually that's going on in your brain and biology. That makes it more than just a digital thing standing. So that's like
He's got a very good beard. I'm just I'm looking at the large. I still don't really understand. Like, my current thought is talk about weather, which is a big problem, right? But then the exact same problem is basically drum swarms, right?
Like say, potentially behavior of society.
Right, and again, everything else.
An example of the problem that it can solve if it had the speed or efficiency at a quantum. I think it's an image faster.
Right?
Current massive sensor is a computer. Every like 2 months, I'm like, I was like, right now it's around 0, right? So, like, but the like, how do you concurrently communicate data from like hundreds of drones? Like that's like What are you trying to do to help out right now? What are you trying to do to help out right now? You personally. Software? Like, are you writing software? Sorry, I missed that one.
So I think storytelling is a correct both.
That's
They have a really tough lot of that.
Yeah, somebody in our company pinged me and they're like, "Hey, go." And I know where
Yes. Yeah, he was, so I lived in Seattle. I spent a significant portion of my specific. Yeah. How on yourself?
Do you have an office? Do you have a team in Austin at all? It's just you.
Because
I was gonna say, like, I would love to come by. Anyway, I'm just gonna message you.
Okay, both are fast and going to you can definitely slow down a bit, which is not a bad
Hey, Michael. Hey, good to meet you. How much is that? Like a hair. Hey, you don't have to like scan it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, follow up on my question. Everybody answered. Right? There is. Do you live in here? Yeah. My daughter lives in Florida. Anyway, the killer app question is, my perspective, like a real question. And it's almost always not ideal. It's almost always like you have an angel in your shoulder and it's something, like a monster gets more traction. And there are all these scientific problems that need more compute, and they sound too idealistic. And I'm like wondering what is the less idealistic. You know, it's usually I want to kill these people. I don't want to be killed. We should have more sex. Like it's usually something ridiculous like that, right? Sure. 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 Yes. Yeah. Like literally a computer was a person doing calculation. They're like, get rid of the women. We're going to use the machine. Yeah. Okay, so. Yeah. Why did IBM quit? Right? IBM. Okay, so IBM won because it did ERP and supply chain. Well, sure, but like when they got big, it was ERP. It was basically like, you know, payroll, supply chain, accounting, foreign shit. Wait, say that again. Yeah, CG what? Yeah, but I don't buy that. So I had this conversation there where it was like current swarm drone data processing. We're like, why does supply chain, the way that supply chain data automation works is basically like, I have something that weighs this much, that left this port at this time, like, and the only reason it would need quantum is if there's a whole layer of data. Yeah. So, yeah, concurrent visual processing. Yeah. So, just give me the answer. Go ahead. Okay, so. And that's where actually, what? The quantum part relationship. Yeah. Yeah, but okay. So I spent the last 17 years in San Francisco with the 6 months ago. There's a guy in San Francisco named Mitch King. He was most famously the chairman of the Whurley Foundation. But he originally wrote the program Wasiq Bokhari, which was the pre-Excel thing. And there's this kind of folklore in computing, which is it wasn't until Wasiq that computers were something basic, right? It's literally you would you'd have an idea of something, and then it's no, and in Silicon Valley it's called the killer app, which is why. Yeah. I always talk to people that are more experienced than me, like I do, but the thing that I just heard is worth thinking about. You didn't say what I heard, which is concurrent visual processing from the same set of visual data. Visual data coming from visual sources, right? I'm trying to think what actually power of quantum computing, right? Porn doesn't need it, VR, on a good day. But okay, you have 18 cameras looking at the board, right? You don't actually have to build programs that make the observation, right? You're building the hardware that supports the programs that make the observation. But the internet didn't really take off until DNS, right? You need something like a DNS, something like TCP/IP, right? Where And usually it's like a distortion or something. It's funny, all the capitalists make money off of communists. It's never right. Yeah. So, but I have not seen it. This is what I do for fun, but so I don't do anything else. Just drink beer and talk shit. Yeah. So, but like what I have not seen is like concurrent visual processing API, right? If that makes sense. And I actually think if you guys got courageous and said we're gonna hire this PhD student or whatever to make a concurrent, basically the DNS of concurrent visual processing, that everyone would want, because then it's like, oh, I have like 58 cameras watching my whatever it is, and security guard, I don't know, whatever. But like, this concurrent visual processing from all angles is a quantum level problem, right? And what I heard everybody say, what I heard everybody say is, we're a platform, everybody knows the problems. You can solve cancer if the cancer researcher rolls up and is asking you about questions about results. You know, it's like, what if you did all the bigger, you're not going to do but you do it. Sure, you can. I mean, I'm being an asshole, right?
Hey, how you doing? Will. Hey, Will, I'm Will. Sorry, I'm already big enough.
Texas.
I'm not. I'm from North Carolina. Yeah, you know, I'm like, yeah, North Carolina's like a little bit south, but you know.
So I'm being annoying. Like, what's the killer app?
Oh.
And I think it's killing people. So I think it's like, you know, drone swarm visual compute at the same time. That's the killer app. And literally, it's to kill people. Concurrent visual compute is not like I've never seen that. And like
a ton of data, something that
and I got my graduate degree in image processing of map data. And we were doing, but like the point is like, you know, it's like the more vantage points you have, the more pixels you have, the more you have to process, and it's an exponential problem, not a not a linear problem. Because my biggest thing with quantum computing is like, what needs that kind of computing? Like, but I'm not a PhD.
Well, I mean,
I haven't tried to.
I work for a company that uses that kind of
really
or something.
Tell me.
We have a
and
we're
you're not
actually,
selling?
No,
Are you selling?
No, we're not. We actually we have a presentation at Dartmouth tomorrow for the Impact Series. My company's called Players QB. We use quantum compute for what we call quantum drug design. That's our platform, and so we're essentially looking at a fragment-based model that's 10 to the 30 big, right? And then saying how can we the things that quantum can do, and so far we've been using it on people. We're presenting to DARPA tomorrow, so I can say we're presenting to DARPA tomorrow.
Halfway this weekend.
Yeah, right. We run it now. Heading lane, we run it on IQ. Sorry, IQ as well. So running on Eagle, and it's run. Like we ran a QAOA solution. We're doing that for the DARPA stuff with Ebola.
You're doing computational drug discovery. Computational drug discovery. Remarkably large.
Remarkably large. The whole thing. Like, you know, unlike the guy, I have to put it between the data set with the fragment.
Thank you very much.
That you can say, wow, chemical phase is 10 to 60.
That's very I don't want to die. Nobody.
Right, yeah.
I don't want to die. Well, and not dying is important.
Not so it's definitely one of those things where you can do more personalized medicine. And people are looking at it, they're real things for us. They speed up assets. So you can 20,
You know, like in time that you can get free, you can get 30.
Unfortunately, I've heard this pitch 85 times.
I don't doubt it, but like we're running into doing it right now.
It's an execution and time.
I would love to connect. I know our principal engineer is presenting tomorrow at DARPA. He'd love to talk to you about it. We've been talking to somebody, you're going to have to remind me of this rep in town. I met her at the event where she goes here for a short amount of time. Okay.
Do you know related sciences?
Look them up.
One of my friends.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to connect with Maurice. But Maurice is really our person that's kind of pushing, looking at other architectures. You know, we try to build the system very system agnostic, right? Platform agnostic in terms of qualifications. Sure. You want to do QR code? I got one of those.
I want to take your hand. Second, Chairman. There's still some Chairman PASQAL.
That should give you like my whole all my contact. But yeah, I have so and I do our communication. I will say what you said at the end about the relation between the quantum mechanics of the world around us and the connection to that. I'm like, that's what I've been talking about. I used to work with Doug Fink at Quantum Computer Report. Now it's one of the biggest things. Like, when we get that nailed, it will offer so many different possibilities. We're going to try to do a lot of things with it. So yeah, absolutely. Let's be in touch. I'll put you in touch with those guards. Here, you want to do the same thing? I got QR code. Do that.
Hey, but I'm always the stupidest person in the room, so that's why I ask these questions.
What's great to be torn? I mean, you're not lying, right? Yeah. Just take a picture of it.
Oh shit. I'm not this cool yet. This is what the Chinese do. Will Simpson.
It's like, I was carrying business cards, like.
No. It's just,
so
the QR code.
I have it all the time. I never.
The QR code is.
I can run into you here. I can run into some guy on this golf course that's in the high power computing, and I can be like, hey, radio, let's connect. So.
Okay, so let me read a company description of Related Sciences, which is the company my friend. Sure. And by the way, he's not there anymore, so I'm not going to spill the tea. But how close is this to when you go? Okay. Related Sciences is a science-driven drug discovery firm. Related Science invests in the discovery of clinical medicine, utilizing a specialized from ground up operational scale and security.
Are they working in quantum or are they working in AI?
Neither. They're working in big data.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, kind of the two sides right now, there aren't that many people doing kind of quantum drug discovery. There's qubits for pharmaceuticals, but that's all that's going to do tonight. There's Schrodinger, right? But they're really going to say AI. What we found out as we marketed this way is like, we started to deal with some of the big names that we would know right off the top of our head, and they're like, oh yeah, we're not talking about it, but we are researching, right? Like we have a whole section of people that's looking at quantum computing for that, but they're all stealth about it, right?
So can I want to ask a dumb question?
Sure.
Right?
I'm the dummy of my company.
So for me, the biggest break, because I often think about just this right.
Right. Yeah, very important.
I evaluate them. Okay, so the biggest breakthrough has been SVG files, right? So .svg, right? File standard. Now you have.
All right, everyone. If you aren't helping with the equipment, please make your way towards the exit, please.
No, you're good.